Story time about how my neighbor killed my dog. So a little background information. When I was about 3 years old, my parents got me a German Shepherd. And my neighbors who lived next to us absolutely loved our dog. And so did their kids. Like their dad literally put a doggy door in the fence, so that way our dog could go back and forth from our house to his house. Well, when I was about 8 years old, my neighbors decided to sell their house. So he told us that he had to take out the doggy door because the people that were buying his house hated animals. Well, the people who had just bought his house, they ended up moving in before he could take out the doggy door. So our new neighbors asked us if we could put like a piece of plywood in front of the door so that way our dog couldn't get through. And they said that they would do the same to their side of the fence. So my dad said, yeah, he put a piece of plywood in front of there. Well, my dog, Gabe, the one night that my brother let him out, he ended up getting the plywood off of the doggy door. Well, my brother literally had to crawl through the doggy door to get the dog before one of them saw him in the yard. Like for Part 2 about how my neighbors killed my dog. So like I said, my brother let the dog out, and my dog got the piece of plywood off of the door. And my brother had to crawl through the doggy door to get my dog out of our neighbor's yard, so that way our neighbors wouldn't wake up and know that he got through. But whenever my brother went to go get Gabe, he realized that my neighbors didn't even have a piece of plywood on their side of the fence or anything. So my brother told my dad, and my dad went over there the next day to talk to them. And he pretty much said, I'm not going to have a piece of fucking plywood on my side of the fence if you're not going to be doing anything on yours to prevent my dog from going into your yard. And they were like, oh, well, your old neighbors never took out the doggy door. And my dad was like, that's not our fucking fault. Well, then our new neighbors said, if your dog all of a sudden becomes sick or just does not come back, don't be surprised. My dad decided to replace the door himself. Well, once Gabe realized that the doggy door was gone, when we would let him outside, he would literally just sit there and bark at the fence. Well, 2 weeks later, Gabe ended up passing away, and we found out it's because our neighbors were giving him rat poison. Story time about how my best friend got with my boyfriend. Whenever I was in 6th grade, my mom had put me in this summer camp, and that's where I met my best friend, Jenna. Well, any boys that I liked at summer camp, Jenna would try and go after them. So fast forward, Jenna and I never went to the same school, which was so nice because I could literally tell her about any guy that I liked and she would not know who the hell it was. Okay guys, real quick before we continue with this story time, today's story time is sponsored by my favorite investing app called Public. With the app Public, I always know which stocks are trending and what my friends and other awesome people are investing in. So make sure to go click the link in my bio to start investing with as little as $1. Okay guys, back to the story. Well, I decided to invite her to my school's football game, the one that my boyfriend was going to be playing at. So I'm getting ready at my house and we're about to go pick her up. And she tells me that she's going to wear one of her dad's Hawaiian button-up shirts and some jean shorts. So I decided to wear the same thing because I didn't want her to feel uncomfortable because she never met anybody at my school before. Like for part 2. Story time about how my best friend got with my boyfriend part 2. Real quick, sorry this part is really late. TikTok would not let me post this video at all. So I pick her up and she's wearing a completely different outfit than what she told me she was wearing. And the whole time we were at the game, she was bothering me about who my boyfriend was. And because I knew she was a hoe, I definitely did not tell her who it was. Well, the one week I couldn't make it to one of my boyfriend's football games. And Jenna just decided to show up to my school's football games even though she didn't even fucking go there. Well, the one night she met my boyfriend. She texted me about it that night saying, oh, he's super cute, da-da-da-da-da. I asked my boyfriend what he thought of her, and he said that she was weird and she was hitting on all of his friends. So I thought I didn't have to worry about them getting together, right? Wrong. He had invited me to this party and said that I could bring her, so I decided why not give her the benefit of the doubt. Jenna and I had planned on leaving that night because my mom couldn't pick us up in the morning. Well, Jenna ended up spending the night, and I went back there in the morning, and there were hickeys all over my boyfriend's neck. Story time about why I beat up my best friend. So a little background information. Her and I had been best friends since we were in 7th grade. Her family was rich, mine was poor, and at first she was a really good friend. She was always there for me whenever I needed her. Until our freshman year of high school, which is when her and I started hanging out with boys. Now my mom was kind of strict. She wouldn't really let me hang out with boys, but her mom was more lenient about her hanging out with boys. Every weekend she would throw a party at her house. And she would throw them in her attic because one, it was huge, and two, her parents didn't give a fuck what she did up there. Anyways, she would always offer to do my hair and makeup before the party started, which always made me really excited because I never really put any work into my physical appearance. Well, little did I know, the only reason why she would offer to do my hair and makeup at these parties was so that way she could make me look like shit in front of all the boys. So after that, I taught myself how to do my own makeup and do my own hair, like for part 2. Part 2 about why I beat up my best friend. So like I said, I learned how to do my hair and makeup, and she went on vacation for like a month straight. Well, when she came home, she threw another party, and she was like, don't worry, after I'm done getting ready, I'll do your makeup and do your hair. And I was like, no, it's fine, I got it. She literally looks at me and she goes, are you sure? You don't really know how to do that. Like, it'll probably look really bad. And I'm like, why the fuck would you say that? She goes, no, like, I don't mean it to be rude. It's just that, like, I want you to look good in front of the boys and stuff like that. Like, sis tried to talk me into getting a shower for a full, like, 20 minutes. So after that, the whole night, she's literally being a pick-me girl. She's making all these comments about me in front of the boys, and I just keep brushing them off until her next party. We got ready, and I put on these expensive shoes that I had just bought, and she goes, wow, you just like really like to copy my style, don't you? So she starts making comments that whole night about how my family's poor and stuff like that, and she threw up all over my shoes. So I dumped the trash can that everybody had threw up in that night on her, punched her in the face, but like 2 months later, she came to my house and apologized. Extremely creepy story time on how my aunt passed away. So a little background information. About 5 years ago, my aunt had gotten pregnant. It was really weird because a few months before she got pregnant, the doctor told her that she would never be able to have kids. And her husband had been trying for years. Well, I think like 2 weeks after the baby was born, it had passed away. And I don't really know why. For some reason, my mom won't tell me. Which is weird, but anyways, after that, my aunt just felt like a lot of things weren't going the way that she wanted them to in her life. So she decided to get closer with God. Well, every Sunday night, we go to my grandparents' house for a family dinner. And while we were there, my aunt starts going on this whole rampage. She said that God's not giving her the answers that she needs, and I don't really know what she means by answers. So my grandparents kick her out because she's acting like a psycho. Well, the same night at 3 a.m. in the morning, we hear a knocking on the door. And lo and behold, it's my aunt. So my mom lets her in because she feels bad and feels like she's the only one that will actually listen to my aunt. So she makes everybody sit at the kitchen table. And she pulls out a Ouija board from her bag, like for part 2. Creepy story time about how my aunt passed away, part 2. So like I said, she makes us all sit down at the kitchen table and she pulls out a Ouija board. She was like, I found out how I can get some answers. I just feel like I need you guys around me for positive energy. And my family is very, very religious. Like, we don't fuck with that shit. But because my mom felt bad for her, she let her use it in our house. But my mom didn't want my sisters and I around that, so she just sent us to bed. Well, the next morning, I wake up and I ask my mom what happened with the Ouija board situation. My mom just said that it was really scary because before she thought it was like a load of bullshit, and she said that her and my dad didn't touch the Ouija board because, like I said, they were very religious and did not mess with that stuff. But apparently, it said for her not to buy a house with the numbers 2815. Well, 2 years later, my aunt got remarried, and her husband ended up having 2 kids. So they bought a new house, and no, it didn't have the numbers on it. One of their kids accidentally shattered the glass door, so they went and got a new one, and it came with those exact numbers on it. 2 days later, the house burnt down and nobody survived.
How would you react if you were in your hotel room and some of the furniture started to move around? And then you walk out your door to go to leave and you hear a baby crying from the hallway, only to walk out and see absolutely nothing. Well, this is a common experience at the Skirvin Hotel. And while I'm a big fan of ghost hunting and don't really get scared too easily, it is so unsettling to know that so many NBA players will not come back into this hotel again after experiencing paranormal activity. So why is this place so terrifying? Well, the Skirvin Hotel is older than a century. It was built back in 1910 and located in Oklahoma City. The founder of the hotel, William Balzer Skirvin, really wanted a glamorous hotel. It was Prohibition during this time, alcohol was still illegal, and this hotel became a booming speakeasy. On top of this, his daughter Promesta ended up becoming the ambassador to Luxembourg under Harry Truman. So she brought in so much clout. This hotel quickly got a reputation nationally. But this is when Mr. Skirvin decided to have an affair, which created a horror story. Part 2 to the Skirvin Hotel. So W.B. Skirvin is described as a man who really liked to have a good time, he liked to drink, he would also chase women. And somewhere along this, he ended up falling for one of his hotel mates named Effie. And while this man was a widower, you still have to remember that this is the early 1900s. So when the affair started, it was extremely scandalous. And Effie ended up getting pregnant. So Mr. Skirvin is like, oh my gosh, I did not just get a maid pregnant. I need to prevent a scandal. And his answer was to lock her in a room on the 10th floor. So Effie stayed in this room until she got to full term, had her baby, and remained locked away. Slowly, she lost her sanity and grew more and more depressed, and ended up grabbing her infant and throwing herself along with her baby out of the window of the 10th floor. And from this moment on, so many things have been reported around the hotel, including furniture moving around at night, people just feeling an eerie weight on their chest, and because no one could get a decent night's sleep in it, they closed in 1988, but reopened later. Part 3 to the Skirvin Hotel. So the hotel ended up reopening in 2007, and the reports continued of a baby crying in the hallway, and guests in the hotel would walk out and not see anything. And so many men that have stayed there have reported hearing a female voice in their rooms, or also seeing the figure of a naked woman while taking a shower. And it was really blown up whenever basketball players started to stay there when they would play in OKC. Derrick Rose, who grew up in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in Chicago, couldn't spend one night in there without making James Johnson share a room with him. Ron Artest actually thought about filing charges against the Skirvin because the ghost was inappropriately touching him. And Kyrie Irving will most likely be making a movie about the hotel. And Eddie Curry was literally on the 10th floor and had to spend the night in Nate Robinson's room because he got so scared. This man is literally like 7 feet. So it really makes me feel like there's something very scary going on. So my best friend and I will be hopping in our car and going down to check out this hotel. We'll be staying the night and vlogging the whole thing for YouTube, so go check it out. Also, go over to her account if you want to hear more about the concept of ghost hunting. Picture this, you spend hundreds if not thousands of dollars on a luxury villa in a private island. You are promised to be flown in on a private jet, have top chefs make your food, see some of the best artists in the world. Seemingly on social media, big influencers might be there, such as Hailey Bieber, Kendall Jenner, but instead, what you spent thousands of dollars on was chaos. You are stuck on an island in an abandoned construction site with 5,000 other people, unable to find your luggage, fighting for people over wet mattresses, and unsure of when you're going to be able to go home. Oh yes, and this is your Top Chef food, by the way. This was literally supposed to be the greatest music festival of all time, and instead ended up being one of the biggest scams of all time. So how exactly did we get here? Billy McFarland, who happened to be a young entrepreneur, along with his friend Ja Rule, the rapper, were flying whenever they came across a private island. This island, called Norman's Cay, was previously owned by Pablo Escobar, the drug lord. Part 2 to Fire Festival. According to the FBI, Billy had everyone fooled. He wasn't necessarily a serial entrepreneur, he was a serial scammer. And this provided to be his biggest one. After seeing this island, he wanted to host a music festival that was straight out of a dream. Festivals usually take about 12 months to plan. Billy thought that he could put it together in 8 weeks. He started by gathering all the top influencers, Hailey Bieber, Bella Hadid, and put them together for a massive promotional video. He had other big influencers such as Kendall Jenner post an orange tile to their Instagram to give the impression that they were going, even though they weren't and they were paid like $200,000 to post this. This caused a significant amount of hype. It was all over social media. The news was covering it, articles were being written. So whenever tickets came out, it was sold out to 5,000 people immediately. People spending extra for nicer beachfront 8-person villas. While the island's one request to Billy was that he doesn't bring up that it's Pablo Escobar's island. And what does he do within the first promo? Says that this island was previously owned by Pablo Escobar. So he was kicked off that day and had to go somewhere else. Part 3 to Fire Festival. Even though he had to go somewhere else due to all the hype, he was getting in major deals. Major Lazer, Pusha T, Blink-182, and Billy had involved so many investors into this that there was no way that he could back out because he used the money from the investors on the project. He ends up flying around until he finds the island of Great Exuma, which is not a private island. However, on the website, they edit it to make it look like it is. And they find an abandoned development site. No buildings, no villas. Yet they still advertise as if there are. They end up finding tents left over from Hurricane Michael and say, yup, this is good enough. So the production team is extremely worried and they're like, hey, we're gonna have to post pictures of what this looks like so people can decide if they want to come or not. Billy responds by just firing them. Somehow he thought people were just gonna show up and be okay with this after spending all that money. And to get more money, they implemented cashless wristbands, like asking people who already paid to send them extra money for their wristband. While people are concerned and asking questions on their social media, but they turn off their comments. Soon it was time for people to show up. Part 4 to Fire Festival. Because they weren't really answering people's problems, Blink-182 was the first one to drop out. And then the night before people were supposed to show up, a storm hit, soaking and ruining everything that they had set up previously. Yet for Billy, canceling was still not an option. They oversold and there wasn't even going to be enough beds for staff. Well, the plane flew in, bringing in all the guests. And to distract them from the actual site, they bussed them over to a restaurant at the end of the island and just fed them alcohol for 6 hours straight. So what they thought was a pre-party was actually just a diversion. Eventually, they were like, we can't just leave them here, we're gonna have to bus them over. So once the people that paid thousands of dollars saw this campsite, you can just imagine the reaction. They were confused, shocked, and didn't have their luggage, but they just kept feeding them alcohol. That night, they finally brought out all the luggage and told people to just go claim it, so there was no order. And Billy walked out and said everyone who bought a villa can just pick out a tent. And this is when the chaos began. Hundreds of people broke out, sprinting for a tent. Part 5 to Fire Festival. You can literally see from these photos how chaotic it was. And it didn't take long for social media to find out. This was blasted everywhere the next day, and the most famous thing to come out of it was this cheese sandwich. Their luxury meals. This particular island was also on a very famous holiday for them, so none of the hotels or resorts nearby could take anyone. All of the music acts canceled. And by that day, Billy and Fire Festival was viral. He tried to play it off like this result was out of his control, even though it was completely in his control. He canceled the event, but there wasn't enough planes to fly people back. So people were legitimately stuck there with no food, no water, no air conditioning. Because remember, this was supposed to be a cashless event. And all the locals who helped set up and were never paid started an angry mob. He promised that there would be a 2018 festival, but it never happened. Billy and Ja Rule were sued for $100 million in a class action lawsuit and sentenced to 6 years of prison. He ended up getting in trouble for starting a podcast in jail recently. But if you want to hear that story, go over to my Instagram. It'll be on my middle reels tab.